thank you for joining us for Postpartum in the Raw, where we are interviewing real parents with real stories, real raw. We are so excited to welcome our guest today, Frances Tang. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Jacqueline. Excited to talk about postpartum because honestly, I don't think enough people are talking about it.
Yes, yes. So we had a chance to chat and chew a little bit before we hopped on, but I really want to lead in and kind of set the tone for what was your actual expectations going into postpartum? Because I think one of the challenges is that we don't have realistic expectations. So what were you expecting when you found out you were pregnant and that you were going to be having a baby?
I don't think that there was really any information about postpartum. Like there is and there isn't. Like I feel like there's some channels that are trying to shed light on postpartum, and the major like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy thing you hear is like your postpartum poop. But that's honestly like it, or like being aware of signs of postpartum depression. But I mean, no one can prepare you for any of that. I feel like no matter what they tell you. So maybe that's why people don't talk about it. Like I don't know, but that's not what you think about in your head. It's kind of like before you like get married or before you have a baby, like you just have no idea until it happens. So I didn't, but I am grateful for some things that different friends like had me do. Like, for example, I had a friend set up a meal train for me. Right. Mm-hmm. And although it was like when she set it up, I was pregnant. I was like, this is nice. But when we actually had it and needed it, I was like, this is like an absolute must. Like, there's no way I'm cooking right now. I do not want to eat takeout every day. Like it's crazy, but it's also something that's still not very like well known.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the other piece. If you were focused or only thinking of postpartum poop or whatever light things, did you even know how to prepare outside of what your friends were kind of coaching you through? So does that mean that you had no preparation at all on your end?
I bought some of the like the usual suspect kind of stuff, like the Frida bottle, like squirter for like your butthole, and like the numbing spray, mm-hmm. and like the ice packs for your vulva. But no, I mean, it's like you also don't know what you'll need until you get there, right? Because I didn't know if I was going to end up having a C-section. I didn't know how much I was going to tear. Like, you don't really know till you get there. And a lot of that stuff, you can't even like return if you don't use it because it's like personal care products. Right. So that makes it really hard.
Yeah. So given that, how would you describe, because can you give us just an idea of where you are on your postpartum journey so that we can understand exactly where you're at in this game?
Yeah. So I have a daughter. She just turned 1, which means that I stopped breastfeeding a couple months ago because she started biting me, which no one warned me about. The most painful thing ever. And I'm just trying to wean off pumping right now, but it's insane how like it's not done, right? Like my body is still like, I like pole dance and everything is still so painful. And I'm like, I don't understand why. And my teacher is like, it's because you're still pumping. Like your skin is still something, there's still things going on. Like you're not the same person. So I'm a year out from when she was born.
And how would you describe your postpartum experience thus far?
It's like not fair, right? Like, especially if you're breastfeeding. So when she was born, there was a formula shortage. So that wasn't even really like an option as backup. And so at that time, like breastfeeding, I feel like you already have so much anxiety having a newborn, right? But I had extra anxiety because I was like, okay, well, if I don't produce enough or she's not eating or she latches weird, then like, she's not going to eat. There's no formula. Like there was people who were donating their breast milk to random strangers on the internet because it was that bad at that time. So there's no way to anticipate that. And then although I tried to look up education about like pumping, it is so confusing. I feel like, we run startups. We're not dumb, but like figuring out how to use a pump was like it's just not intuitive. And there wasn't really like a straightforward guide and figuring it out or like knowing what's normal or not normal. And I have Kaiser, so they don't automatically set you up with a lactation consultant. And I didn't know that like my nipples were not the standard, whatever, 33 millimeter like size, right? And so I basically had to like have a couple mental breakdowns about pumping and like why it wasn't working. Why is there nothing coming out? Until I came across something random that was like, maybe your nipple is not the standard size, and had to like figure that out on my own. So much of it was, I mean, you're in this like, this like haze of no sleep, but figuring those things out despite the fact that we have the internet.
Yeah, because here's the thing. My work and my background is as a doula, birth and postpartum. I lean towards traditional support. But one of the things that I think is absolutely insane is that we present pregnancy and postpartum like it's one size fit all. So when you're talking, I'm thinking, oh yes, the nipple shields, and even those come in different sizes. The phalange things on the pumps, those come in different sizes. But if you go to the store or if you look on the packaging, it's not going to say, hey, these are your options or, sold separately. It just presents this one option. And if it doesn't fit you, you're left thinking that you're doing something wrong or that your body's not working, or you just have a whole host of things that are going through your mind. That's like, why on earth, as many breasts as we have, why would we have one pump?
I know.
It's all the nipples. Like, it's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah. And it's like I like did my research. Like, I'm an internet person and it wasn't anywhere. Or like when your baby comes home and how they sleep really loud. But like when they say loud, they don't say sounding like they're choking and dying the first night home because they're choking on amniotic fluid. Like, that was the thing that I probably needed to hear, so that first night we weren't just up paranoid that she was going to like choke on her own spit up. We didn't even know what she was choking on. Right. And so it's those things. So I guess based on everything I'm telling you, it was filled with a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Are you still feeling that way, or have you found a groove?
There's always new things. I do think that whether it's due to like postpartum or just like the life shifts, having a daughter has definitely made me rethink a lot of like life, like work priorities, because I have a startup. And so pouring so much of my like time and energy in life, my startup is my first child. And so having a real baby definitely like shifted things and shifted how I think about everything. I can't speak to whether it's like that if like you're working a full-time, career elsewhere, but just having a startup, those two things combined, it's like high emotions on both ends for like 100% of the time.
I'm telling you, that's real talk. Maybe you can speak a little bit to this, because when we were talking off camera, you mentioned, you consider yourself to be a feminist. You're like, yeah, all things equal, whatever your thing is, right? Your company is built on this. You have all this stuff. But then you get hit with real life, real postpartum, and you're like, there's some differences. My husband partner is not experiencing postpartum the way that I am. And so can you talk a little bit about how that even impacted you from a life perspective standpoint? Like, what was that like for you to experience postpartum and have these like ideals and then have life come and just smack you in the face?
Yeah. Like I was saying, I am a self-proclaimed feminist. My company is like a product for women to help us feel more comfortable, right? It is inherently super feminist, like everything we do. But like from the moment I gave birth until now, I'm like, this is like fucked up. Like now I'm just really mad, right? And a lot of it isn't like, it's not my partner's fault that he doesn't have boobs and can't like breastfeed, right? But it's like, okay, like the amount of time, like from giving birth itself, I was like hemorrhaging during the delivery, and I couldn't feel it because I took the drugs. But like that, even just thinking about that and thinking about the rate of maternal death because of hemorrhaging, like it's insane. And it's so high in the US. Like, right? Didn't those statistics just come out that the US has like the highest rate of maternal death, which is absolutely insane.
1965. And if you think about all the technological advances, so-called progression that has been made since 1965, we really have to look at this and go, like, that's just utterly ridiculous. We're not even on par with, I think you're talking about when it comes to considered first world countries, we're like at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
Our maternal death rate. And it's actually insane and uncalled for. And so, yeah, we are not getting better.
Like seriously, like what the I don't know if I can I cuss a lot, but
you're already in there, so go ahead.
Yeah, because like okay, so like that, like the moment you give birth, you're literally risking your life here, right? And that's it. Like I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't have caught my hemorrhaging, and it was only because I had like a fibroid, right? And so I don't know, I could be dead. And so there's like that. There's the birth itself, and then there's like the lack of. Like they have the postpartum suite, but really they're just like, here's the information, cool, go home. I remember when we were leaving the hospital, we couldn't figure out how to loosen the car seat straps. We had installed it correctly. We had like, read the instruction, but we hadn't actually like placed anything, like loosen them. And we were like, it's done. We're never going to leave the hospital. Like, this is it. This is where everything ends. Right. It's just so much. And, then just living in the living room, just like being a human source of food on and off, and being the one to like wake up and feed. And I mean, it's all the stuff you go through, and then you get like 4 weeks if you're lucky, right? Like I have my own start, so I could kind of like dictate that. But I will say that we didn't tell our investors that I was pregnant until we had a plan, but until pretty close, because like it changes things. So this is kind of like a pre and postpartum thing, like knowing the perception of you like in the world is gonna change. Yeah. And that's not even like a physical postpartum thing. It's just like a factual, I don't know, cultural thing that happens. Like you're going to be perceived as like less focused, less capable, like only caring about your family. Like whether or not any of those things are true, it's these assumptions that are like placed on you the minute you tell someone you're pregnant to like, now I'm a mom, and it puts you in a different category. Like, right? Like I'm not Frances, the founder, I'm a mom.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that, because I have a startup as well, and it was born out of the work that I have done as a birth worker. But you're right. If you have, babies or younger children, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that mom over there, everything is about, school lunches and whatever. And the fact of the matter is that if you have a core value that, family is important to you, it actually doesn't inherently decrease your strategy, your strategic thinking, your business capabilities, how you're able to show up and lead or build out or any of those things. But now they've given you an extra hurdle to jump across, because now you're not just jumping across the regular fires of being a founder. You're now dealing with people's perceptions. And so that first year, your emotional and mental and physical health is so sensitive. How has that portion, because I know how being a founder has impacted me just mentally and emotionally. How do you think that that's contributed to you in this postpartum season, like emotionally and mentally? What would you say?
Okay, so there's like so many like channels of pressure that I think people receive in general, not just founders, right? So there's like the pressure of being a female founder. There's a pressure of being a founder in the space that we're in. There's the pressure of being a mom, right? Like so much time spent breastfeeding and on the couch, you're scrolling through Instagram where there's like perfect moms that can like afford like Montessori playroom and like do all this stuff. And you're like, why can't I do that stuff? So there's like all this pressure. And there was this point when I was pregnant. I was telling you before we started recording, there was this guy that went viral on LinkedIn, the crying CEO. It's like this white dude who was like crying because he was like upset that he had to like lay people off. It turned into a meme, right? Crying CEO meme. And when other founders ask me about pregnancy and being a founder, I was like, I have a crying CEO photo of myself, but it's because I was at this like crossroads where I was super pregnant, didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't want to tell anyone that I was pregnant, right? Like a lot of people were like, did you just have a random baby? Or like, did you have a secret baby? And I was like, I did, because first of all, it's none of your business. But second, I know that the perception changes when you have a baby and when people see you. And so I guess to circle back to your question, it has been like pressure from all fronts, all around, and it hasn't stopped. And I mean, it never stops, right? Like mom guilt just never stops.
Listen, my oldest daughter is a sophomore in college. I have a middle schooler, and then I have a 9-year-old. He just turned 9, third grader. And I wish that I had better news for you.
You're like, yeah, the minute they turn 9, it stops. Like, no.
No, not at all. No, because you're then, it evolves, right? You're shifting into them being concerned about their future and the types of decisions that they're making. And so the feelings change. Soon you hopefully won't be sleep deprived and all that. You won't be breastfeeding, all that. But it's just going to change to something else. But I really don't think that people understand the layers and the multifaceted nature of the first 2 years. And so like, that's what I really just want to just talk about, how people are experiencing this in many different kind of ways. And also just to see like hindsight 2020. You said your friend started that meal train for you. It was a lifesaver. Looking back, you've just completed your first year. What would you have done differently to prepare for your postpartum season if you could go back?
Probably. So I didn't know that we were going to be living out of our living room. I think what's interesting is that you see these beautiful pictures of nurseries on the internet, but you don't use the nursery, right? The baby's sleeping in your room. First of all, they're not in there. They're in your room most likely. And like, so we kept moving around her changing station because we were trying to like get a handle on where our home base was. And honestly, the home base, it was the living room because you can't really do anything. I think, so we were in the middle of COVID. So we didn't like go anywhere. It was pretty isolated. Mm-hmm. I do not regret borrowing a snoo from someone. So we borrowed a snoo, so would absolutely do again. I'm trying to think. It's crazy when they say it's a blur because it's only been a year. But even when I think about that time, I'm like, what were we doing? Like we watched a lot of TV. Like I can't put myself in those shoes again. Because it was like such a different time. Everything just feels really existential, right? Like seeing my life pass through the lens of a human growing. If I were to think about a year ago, just right now, I'd be like, oh, it's not that long ago. I was like doing the same thing. But when I think about a year ago, seeing my daughter, like she's a completely different human now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that meal train, absolutely, maybe extend it for longer, to be honest.
Okay.
To have that support. So having that support, touring the preschools earlier, because they're insane right now, because there's so many COVID babies. So getting on that list sooner. We got on the list pretty early, but getting on multiple lists sooner, having multiple means of backup and babysitters, even if we were not yet ready to have any strangers come into our home because of COVID, because then when we needed it, we were using my parents as my parents help like take care of my daughter. But at one point my mom couldn't, and we like didn't have a backup, right? So having multiple backups already interviewed, ready to go. Cause in that time of need, especially if you're like working or you have something else going on, it is so immensely stressful to like try to take care of a baby at the same time. And so we've had multiple babysitters like bail on us when we needed them. So just like having that set up. So having like these things in place that you don't think you need yet, but when you need them, you need them.
So that's an interesting question. So if you don't mind me asking, what is your cultural background?
I'm Chinese, and I did not do any like other confinement or anything. I don't know if I know anyone who's actually done it. I do have friends that have done, there's like postpartum food delivery services that are like Asian. I don't know if they're like strictly Chinese.
I love that though. Because I was going to ask, there's also, the cultural component where certain cultures have practices and standards for postpartum. And I was just curious, especially when you mentioned your parents coming in and helping you to take care of your daughter, if there was anything that maybe your mom or your aunts or your cousins that have had babies before you brought to you to say, hey, this is something you should do, or this is how you do it to make sure that you thrive in this season. Did you have anyone like that in your community that came and shared that information or made sure that you did certain things?
Chinese people are definitely all about food. Food is love. And so nothing too traditional. I think my mom did try to make me, she brought over a ton of like soup and like fruit. So she's like, eat this, drink this. Like it was all about making sure that we were fed. So in combination with her and my dad continuously dropping off food and that meal train, I didn't have to cook for like maybe 2 months, which was amazing because I can't imagine it, right? I did freeze like meals in advance, right? Because like the internet's kind of like, okay, like freeze meals in advance, like blah, blah, blah. But in practice, it's kind of like sucks to be like, okay, I'm going to like reheat this frozen thing. Like it's just, I don't know. It's just so much nicer when it's there and from someone you care about.
Yeah. So actually the soups are in most traditions and just in physiological good practice is what helps your body heal postpartum. Having warming soups with the peppers or the garlics or the onions, that is something that we utilize very heavily in birth work to help your body heal because in traditional Chinese medicine, birth is a cold event. And so when you're adding in those hot teas, those warming soups with the pepper and the garlic and the onion, it actually warms your body back up to get you back to balance. And so even though mom was like, eat this soup, there was something to that where she knew like your body needs to be warmed back up because of what you experienced. So that's really beautiful that she made sure that you had those things. That's awesome.
Yeah. Chinese people are all about like warm, like being warm. Like it's crazy the amount of clothes that they put on my daughter. Like it's all about just like staying warm. And I think especially because I hemorrhaged and like that loss of like blood and iron, that was heavy on her mind. So I feel like she tried to bring me like iron rich foods knowing that had happened.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So I want you to share also a little bit about your business. You are a fellow founder, so I definitely, before we wrap up, want to give you a chance to share so that people understand just who you are and what you're building and what you've been building even before you entered into your postpartum season.
Yeah. So I'm the founder of Awkward Essentials. We make an after-sex cleanup sponge. It wasn't created because I was trying to get pregnant, but it came in handy because it does not prevent pregnancy. It's just supposed to prevent like squishy pants, dripping, uncomfortable feelings after sex. And so the notion of creating solutions for things that people are not comfortable talking about or just experience in the bathroom, and it's all just this commonality, but the conversation isn't out there. It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar to this, to be honest. Like a lot of the, oh my gosh, crazy things that happen, they don't like phase me. And at one point I did ask, we have a private Facebook community for our customers. I asked them like, what are some postpartum things? I will actually send you that thread because there were some interesting things, everything from people who are talking about filling a condom with water and like freezing it to use as like an ice pack to like you would get the shakes after you give birth, which that was the only place that I saw that or read that, but I didn't see it anywhere else. In all the research during pregnancy, no one else mentioned like getting chills after you give birth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be related to a couple of different things. There are some medications, like if you get an epidural, it could actually be your response to the medication in the epidural. It could be your literal response to your environment. It could be connected to how much blood loss you've experienced. And so there's a couple of different reasons. One of the most common that I've seen is the epidural medication, depending on what is actually in there. You will either shake after you get it and your body kind of processes through it, or as you are giving birth and your levels are changing, you'll begin to like immediately shake. There's definitely a shiver that takes place across the board, but if you have full-on shakes, a lot of times that's connected to the epidural as well.
It was weird, but I'm glad someone said something because I would have been like, what is happening?
Yes. So what would you want to say to someone who's like, listen, this is my first baby. I'm in my second trimester. I've got my pads. I've got my hospital bag packed. I've got my food in the freezer. But I feel like I'm missing something. What advice would you give them 1 year in, literally almost to the date, to help them prepare for what they might experience? It could be positive words. It could be words of warning, caution, anything. What's one line that you would say to postpartum parents as they're getting ready to give birth and experience some things?
Oh, it's so hard. One line.
Two lines if you need to.
Okay. Do the meal train. Get someone to help you with the meal train. It is 100% worth it. And then everything they say, all the good things and all the warnings, it's all true. But I think the good things far outweigh the bad things. So I feel like, we often hear like, you'll never sleep again, blah, blah, blah. But then you also hear the things like, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, they are my life. They are my heart outside of my body. None of that makes sense until the baby is born. And it does outweigh, even though you will hear some like really like scary warnings.
Awesome. That's beautiful. And I think, you know what, you're right. And I think, in this generation, we're getting so much real information that people are like, oh, I don't ever want to experience that. But then it's like, but it's also the most beautiful thing ever.
It's worth it. Yeah.
It's amazing. And it really grows you in ways like you really get pushed to the edge of who you are and who you can be in a way that maybe as founders, we get pushed to that edge quite often. But if you're not in that space and you're not, on an entrepreneurial journey, there's not many spaces that push us to the limit, like having children. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Francis. If you want to share like a website or anything like that people can follow you and find out more about your awkward essentials, feel free. I'll do my best to put her information as well in the show notes so that you guys can follow her. But really, we just want to highlight, we want to have honest conversations here. We want people to know that you're not alone in the challenges that you're experiencing postpartum, that there's other parents out here in so many other different areas that are going through it too. But if we talk about it and we share our insights and we support each other, that we can navigate it very differently than we currently are. So thank you again so much for joining us, Francis, and I'll talk to everyone else later. Bye.
Thanks for having me.